Welcome to Papa's Workshop. This is a video that I almost didn't do, but I wanted to show you in the third phase of making my bed that I could actually use a supersized tapering jig. This is it. This is my supersized tapering jig that is an 8-foot tall piece of plywood, and with this and a few scrap pieces of wood, I was able to make the cut that I needed to straighten out the boards so I could join them together. Let me show you how I did it. So let's get started. I'm going to refer back to the model, and this is the actual headboard. I had already made this bottom section, and it's done and completed. The only thing that I really needed to do is make these two pieces of the 2x12 join together. The problem is, working with yellow pine is not the best furniture making wood. This had warped so bad that this joint would not come together at all. So this needed to be cut and trimmed. There's only one way to do that, and that's with a tapering jig. So I had to supersize it because this is 7 feet 6 inches long. I had an 8-foot piece of plywood. That's what I used to make my supersized jig. Now, the reason I said that I almost did not make this video is because I do not recommend you use this process. This can be inherently dangerous because the piece of plywood that I used was narrower than the 2x12. But again, I can't go out and buy material at this point because of the stay-at-home orders, so I have to make do in the shop with what I have. So creativity is the order of the day. So I did make my jig. I did set up an auxiliary fence, but I do not recommend you doing this at home. So this, guys, is for entertainment only. Enjoy the video. So, what is a supersized tapering jig? Quite frankly, all it is, in my case, in my shop, is an 8-foot long piece of plywood. Along with that 8-foot piece of plywood, I'm going to need a few scrap pieces of wood to be able to secure the board down to this piece of plywood. Now, ideally, when you're using a tapering jig, you want this piece of plywood to be wider than the material that you're actually cutting. Well, I had a 2x12. 2x12, 11.5 inches. This board is only 10 inches wide. So what I actually had to do is take another piece of wood that would be wider. So now, there's my 11.5 piece of 2x12, and this is now wider. So what I did is I secured that to the table saw itself. Not an ideal situation and not something that I would recommend that you do, but in my situation it worked. How do you set up the fence? You actually set it up where this is your straight edge. That has to be positioned right there. Then my auxiliary fence was in position. And then all I need to do is slide over my regular fence. And there it is in place. Now I do need to clamp this down. Okay, clamp this down so it won't move as you slide the tapering jig through the saw. From there, all I have to do is put my 2x12 onto my supersized jig and clamp it down. You do make sure, please make sure that you clamp this down tight. I use screws all through it to be able to hold it. I needed a bump stop at the end so that wood would not slide. Plus, I used a clamp on top to make sure that it didn't move up or down. So in other words, that 2x12 was securely fastened to my tapering jig. So for a few pieces of scrap wood and an 8-foot long piece of plywood, I made a supersized tapering jig. Using 2x12s to make furniture is problematic in itself because this type of material will warp and bow very easily with any type of moisture. And that's what's happened with this. These two pieces, one in particular, has really begun to bow, and I have to be able to straighten these two pieces out before I can join them together, or the joints will not come together and look right at all. So I'm going to show you how to be able to do that using this simple tapering jig. I'll put a link up above because I've used the tapering jig before, but this is a supersized tapering jig. Now I have the 2x12 sitting on my plywood, and on each end it is dead even. But if you look at this, this is almost a ½ inch because there's 3/16 inch there plus the portion that's not being measured. So it's almost a ½ inch. So what I've done is set up a temporary fence because unfortunately my plywood is not wide enough. And from here I'm going to be able to cut that as I have done before using my other tapering jig. This is what I've cut off of it to be able to straighten this board out. So it's paper thin at this point, plus you got to remember I took an 1/8 of an inch to begin with. And I want to be able to show you with this setup, with this 2x12 mounted on my supersized tapering jig, which is nothing more than a piece of plywood that's 8 feet long, and it's clamped down. And I also have bump stops at each end so that this board will not move at all as I slide it through the table saw. And you can see how it starts off with just paper thin and it cuts it. Now this is the one that's actually fairly straight, and it's still cutting that little bit off so that this board is now perfectly straight. You do have to be careful. My hands are way away from the saw blade, but I wanted to show you how to be able to use this supersized tapering jig. Now as far as making the headboard, I did go ahead and glue these two 2x12s together, and they do fit perfectly. And all I'm doing now is putting some supports on the back because, as you might expect, two 2x12s that are just under 8 feet long is rather heavy. So I'm using 4 of these boards across the entire headboard to be able to secure these two pieces together, as well as be able to screw this portion onto the bottom section of the headboard. That way it'll help keep the weight down, but yet it'll still secure everything. To make sure that I have proper alignment when these are assembled, I have the dowel pins in place at each end that will drop into the bottom portion of the headboard to be able to make all of this sync together perfectly. Now that everything is assembled, I'm just going to go ahead and stain this portion of the headboard and prepare it to be able to get it delivered to my son's house. I'm very pleased at how that joint turned out. It is absolutely straight and perfect. Can't ask for anything more. Being able to use a supersized tapering jig was the perfect tool for this application. Hi everyone, thank you for watching my video today. If you like the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below and the little bell next to it so you'll be notified on the different videos that I upload. Also check out the videos over here to be able to stay up to date on the happenings in my shop. So again, thank you for watching my videos.